Coming up on Tech News Weekly, I, Mikah Sargent, am here. Jason Howell is out, but don't worry, I've got a great show planned for you. First, we talk to Craig Hockenberry of the Icon Factory, and also the creator of the first Twitter app. Yeah, he's here to talk about the fact that Twitter has closed off API access for some third-party clients. Then Dan Moren of Sixcolors stops by to talk about all the new announcements from Apple, the MacBooks, the Mac Mini, the HomePod. It's a lot to cover. And then it's time for some stories of the week. First, about how OpenAI hired a company who hires Kenyan workers to filter through the cruft and the awfulness on the internet to try and make ChatGPT a little more palatable. Then I round things out with a little conversation about the Steam Deck and how there have been so many improvements since it was first introduced, and Amazon Smile coming to a close. Stay tuned. This is a show you don't want to miss.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 269, recorded Thursday, January 19th, 2023. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Decisions. Don't let complexity block your company's growth. Decisions' no-code, rules-driven process automation software provides every tool needed to build custom workflows, empowering you to modernize legacy systems, ensure regulatory compliance, and renew the customer experience. Visit decisions.com/twit to learn how automating anything can change everything. And by Drata. Too often, security professionals are undergoing the tedious, arduous task of manually collecting evidence. With Drata, say goodbye to the days of manual evidence collection and hello to automation. All done at Drata speed. Visit drata.com/twit to get a demo and 10% off implementation. And by Thinkst Canary. Detect attackers on your network while avoiding irritating false alarms. Get the alerts that matter. For 10% off and a 60-day money-back guarantee, go to canary.tools/twit and enter the code TWIT in the How Did You Hear About Us box. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. This week, Jason Howell is not here, but I, Mikah Sargent, am here, and we have a very topical way to start off the show today. Joining us to kick things off is the Icon Factory's own Craig Hockenberry. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Hey, thanks, Mikah.
Yeah, it's good to get you on because we've got to talk about something, and that something is Twitter. Before we're going to break into what's going on right now, I was hoping that for folks who might not know, if you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your history with Twitter.
Yeah, my history with Twitter started 16 years ago. We made the first Twitter app. It was originally on Mac OS. Then we made the first Twitter app for iOS, and we made the first Twitter app for the iPad. We've got a long history of making first things for Twitter. And yeah, I've been. There's a team behind the app now, but it was originally my creation.
Yeah, I read through your story over on furbo.org about the origin of TWiT and kind of learning about what was a shower thought, right? I mean, the app was a shower thought.
The Twitter just announced the API, and I was, we all started using it in the web browser, and I thought, well, this would be great as an app. So I was in the shower and actually had the name for Twitterific in the shower. Wow. And then sat down, started coming up with the API or using the API, and had a little prototype. And then our awesome designers at the company took that and made it look great. And, we had our first app and released that in early 2007.
Wow. So, and I mean, when you're saying this, I think that it may not even be driving home enough when you say you created the first Twitter app for macOS and then later the first Twitter app for iPad, the first Twitter, you mean that you predated Twitter's own apps for those clients too?
Yeah. In fact, that's how the word tweet came about, right? And the blue bird. We had this app and we started using it, and I had just put a placeholder icon in the app. So one of our designers came up with this, a guy by the name of David Lanham came up with the blue bird, and we put that in the app, and it was immediately it was a hit. Everybody loved that app icon. And at the same time, I was thinking about nouns and verbs for like menus and things like this, post what, right? We had to, refresh something. And originally I called them twits before your show even existed. And one of the people that was using that early prototype was actually an engineer over at Twitter who said, you got this blue bird, well, why don't you call them tweets? And I was like, oh man, why didn't we think of that? And the rest is history, right? It's in the Oxford English Dictionary now. That was a pretty wild thing, right? The first time I heard somebody mention tweet on a newscast, it was like, okay, this is going to be around for a while.
And that's the thing is, your creation, your team's creation, is part of the bedrock of Twitter itself, and that's what makes what has happened just this week all the more glaring and all the more ridiculous. Can you tell us about the change that Twitter made this week that affected some third-party clients?
Yeah, basically we have a little handshake that it establishes a secure connection. We have some token that we provide to Twitter, and they check that token, make sure it's coming from us. And then they reply with another token that we look at and go, oh, yep, that's coming from Twitter. And then you've got your secure connection. They broke that process, right? We send our stuff to them. They say, nope, you don't have access. And we can't proceed from that point on. So the suspension has basically kneecapped us. And there's nothing we can do about it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the big questions that I had is, how did you even find out that this change had taken place? Did Twitter's developers reach out to you? Did you try accessing Twitter through, how did this happen for you?
Well, there's very few people left at Twitter in their developer relations group, number one. Number two, there was no attempt on their part to contact us, to give us any kind of a heads up that this was happening. It literally was somebody, I forget who it was, but one of our customers said, hey, I can't log in. And then that word got to one of our engineers, a colleague of mine, Sean Heber. And he says, can you go check the Twitter dashboard? And I checked the dashboard, and I saw this big red banner that said, your app is suspended. And
wow,
that is all we know at this point. They say, oh, we're breaking the rules, but what rules? Right?
Because you've been doing it for this long.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Over 16 years, we've complied with a lot of rule changes that they've made. Everything from, how you display a tweet, which ways you authorize with the service. There have been numerous changes over the years that we comply with happily because we get value out of it. Our customers get value out of it. Twitter gets value out of it. Mm-hmm. So for them just to come and say, you're done, and not say why or give us, it's really kind of offensive that they didn't even bother to give us some warning, because it came as a surprise to us, came as a surprise, more importantly, to our customers, right? All they see is an error message. Their thing is not working. That generates a problem for us as far as customer support is concerned. It generates a problem with the, subscriptions. First thing Apple says when you want to retire a subscription is you need to give your customers a heads up. Well, guess what? We can't.
Because you yourself didn't even get a heads up about this. I mean, the fact that you had to find out through a customer and then even still had to go in and look at it to finally see it on the dashboard with just, this is the day that it's taking place. I mean, why do you think Twitter made this change?
Well, let me just say that narcissistic only think about themselves.
Yeah. And by that, the Twitter app itself, the first party client that came, after, is the one that they are most focused on, it seems, at the moment. I mean, you are obviously a long-time developer of a third-party Twitter client, and I imagine have chatted with other folks who make third-party Twitter clients. When you look at it, is it a sizable portion of Twitter's user base that does not use the first-party app? I mean, is this really a money-making opportunity for Twitter by closing down these third party? Because that's kind of the first responses that you see from folks who are trying to think of it from the business side, say, well, those third party users weren't getting the experience that Twitter wanted, that had these ads in them, that had this, that, and the other. And so Twitter's trying to make itself more. But is that really as much of an impact as some argue?
From a number of people, it's probably a very small percentage, very small. From an influence point of view, it's probably much larger, right? A lot of the people that have been on service for a long time, who contribute a lot to the service, have been using it since the beginning and got used to using a third-party client, right? They rely on that third-party client. There are journalists, there are influential tech people. There are a lot of people that we've heard, especially, this situation has brought a lot of people out, and we've seen a huge outpouring of support for us because everybody looks at this and says the same thing. It's like, what the hell, right? This is not the way you do things with a web service.
Right.
This is, there's always a sunsetting phase, everything, whether you're, I could spend hours going over examples, but we all know,
I mean,
right?
Everybody,
you see those blog posts that say, "Oh, we're shutting down the service in April of 2023," right?
Right.
And if we've got something like that from Twitter, we would have dealt with it, right? It's like the bottom line is it's their business; they can do what they want, right? But you don't treat other people like we're being treated now. It's really that simple.
Absolutely. Exactly. I mean, I imagine if a little, a young person down the road opened up a lemonade stand, you go to the lemonade stand and they're like, oh, I'm just going to be here for the next 3 days, but then we're going away. Even that little lemonade stand has a little bit of a heads up that Twitter hasn't provided for a huge number of people. And these businesses that have based a lot of their existence on this platform. It's awful. And that leads me to ask the question of, because I noticed that there were some third-party services that were more business-oriented that did not receive this API cutoff. What are your thoughts there? Why do some clients still get to access the API, but these you and TweetBot and others are not able to access Twitter?
Honestly, I've got no idea. My only speculation at this point is that there's some unpublished usage level that we're going over, right? It's maybe if you've got, 100,000 tokens or 150,000 tokens. I don't know. Absolutely don't know. But I suspect that they have some sort of metric on their system somewhere where they said, oh, anything above this certain level, they're gone.
Yeah,
but that's purely speculation. Again, we know nothing. We've seen the same information that you've seen.
That's, I think, the most wild thing to me. You don't have any more information than anyone else. And that's why I have to ask you, as we kind of round things out, in your opinion, is there a future in which Twitter recovers from these platform changes, be it with its current leadership or even new leadership in place? Has Twitter done too much damage in the different choices that it's made thus far to recover from this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And again, I look back at the early days of Twitter, right? Mm-hmm. The thing that established it early on were things like South by Southwest, WWDC, very developer-centric kind of things, right? People that are really into tech got into Twitter, right? And then it went more mainstream. Well, guess what's happened right now? That same group of people, in a matter of weeks, has moved over to things like Mastodon, microblog, some other service, right? They've abandoned Twitter. That does not bode well for the company.
Right. As you point out, the most influential users, the most active users, the people who like the platform actually are leaving
bailing.
It. Yeah,
they're bailing, right? And I'm not going to post on Twitter anymore. And people love some of the things I say, right? I've picked up, thousands and thousands of followers on Mastodon in the last, week. It's clear to me that people are moving away from Twitter. Mm-hmm. They're honestly, they're screwed in the long term in my mind. As I said at the end of that blog post, they're going to be a $44 billion version of MySpace.
Ooh, if there was ever an insult that really drives it home, that's the one. I know we're running out of time. I did want to ask if you can tell us, is the Icon Factory working on a Mastodon client?
The answer to that is part of this surprise, right? We had no advance notice. We plan our projects at a time. And honestly, we have a contractual commitment until the spring of this year. So we can't right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And that's the thing. The business works. We all schedule things out, right? You plan ahead. Twitter's not planning ahead.
No, it seems day to day, the decisions are being made for sure.
They are literally flying by the seat of their pants, and that doesn't get you very far.
Oof. Well, Craig Hockenberry, I want to thank you so much for carving out some time. I know things are very busy for you right now. Yeah. If folks want to follow you online over on Mastodon, where do they go to do that?
What's that now? I missed that last question.
Oh, did I cut out? If folks want to follow you online over on Mastodon, where should they go to do that?
I'm Hockenberry at mastodon.social.
Awesome.
So, yeah, we're Icon Factory is our blog there has a bunch of information about where we've all moved to. So, yeah, check out blog.iconfactory.com as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And obviously, I'm wishing you the best of luck with your projects and hope to see one from you for Mastodon in the future.
Yeah, we'll do something interesting for sure. It's in our blood.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All righty, folks. Up next, Apple has made a series of announcements as opposed to an event. So we will be talking about the products it has announced this week. Before that, though, I do want to tell you about Decisions, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. Decisions gives IT and business experts the tools to automate anything within their company, all within one no-code platform. Decisions is proven to fix any business process and prepare you to withstand economic uncertainty. Recession resilience, those are the two R's. Recession resilience requires a deliberate management of resources and flexibility to adapt at a moment's notice. The Decisions no-code environment makes it easy for your team to collaborate to build and adjust workflows, dynamic forms, and decisioning processes that fit your unique and ever-changing business needs. This is especially important with today's IT talent shortage. Decisions process automation software, it's a complete toolkit that allows developers and business users alike to build applications and automations with no code required. Their no-code platform is powerful. It includes robust rules and workflow engines and a host of pre-built integrations that connect to any legacy system via API, all within a simple drag and drop visual interface design. It can be deployed on-prem or in the cloud. Companies were caught flat-footed at the onset of the pandemic, but Decisions customers were fully equipped to respond. One of the country's largest private banks built an entire PPP loan application process for small businesses affected by COVID-19 in just 2 days. 2 days! They were the first to market, issuing $1 billion in loans before their competitors even got started. Decisions lets you customize workflows to automate the small decisions, producing faster results with greater accuracy, allowing your team to focus on the important decisions. You can scale your business to better serve your customers while reducing operational costs and saving your team valuable time. One example of how decisions automation software can help is Otis Elevator. You have probably heard of Otis. The Otis Elevator implemented Decisions to run daily pulse checks across the 2 million units operating globally. So in sending out those pulse checks, they find these potential problems before they occur. They avoid downtime. They manage their service technicians efficiently. So if you happen to be riding in an Otis Elevator, you can rest assured you'll arrive safely to your destination. As a recession approaches, the durability of a business's foundation will directly impact its performance and ability to survive. So ask yourself, how strong is your foundation? Decisions Automation Platform provides the solution to any business challenge, automating anything and changing everything to improve your company's speed to market, financial growth, and operational success. They help industry leaders alleviate bottlenecks and automate pain points in their business so you can do what you do best and change the world. To learn more about Decisions no-code automation platform and scope your free proof of concept, visit decisions.com/twit. Head there, decisions.com/twit. And thank you, Decisions, for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, we are back from the break, and that means it is time to welcome back to the show my pal and Sixcolors writer, Dan Moren. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
Hey, Mikah, good to see you.
Good to see you too, sir. So, as we know, Apple held not an event, but I guess held is not the right word then, posted a series of announcements about some new products that it has released. And I thought we'd kick things off by talking about the new MacBook Pros, which have new M2 chips in them. Before we get into that, though, I am a little curious. Were you expecting an event? Or when you saw that these announcements flew by, were you kind of like, oh, no, that makes sense. They did it this way?
No, I think it makes sense that they did it this way. There was some rumor that they wanted to ship this stuff last fall, and it just wasn't ready yet in terms of probably like how many they could actually produce. So I'm not surprised. And given the content of the announcement, it doesn't surprise me that it was an event. I will say, they did post like almost kind of like a pseudo keynote video for them, like that was like 20 minutes long or so, that had kind of all the hallmarks of their usual videos when they do their longer events. So clearly they felt like there was something they wanted to talk about, but it wasn't necessarily something that they need to invite press out to look at.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's dig into it then. We've got a new series of MacBook Pros, and we've also got new chips for those MacBook Pros. What are the kind of highlights of these new devices in terms of performance and capability? I mean, does this one finally also vacuum my floor, or is it just kind of a improvement on what we've had before?
Oh, it won't vacuum your floor, but you could probably use it to slice some cheese or something. I don't know. They're pretty sharp these days. No, the hallmark of these is the new M2 Pro and M2 Max processors. This is obviously a speed bump over the previous generation, which had the M1 Pro and the M1 Max processors. These are the higher end of Apple's own silicon chips, basically the ones that provide a little more oomph in their performance than the standard M1, M2, etc. Apple says these are 20% faster than the previous generation and provide up to 30% better graphics. A footnote there that I thought was interesting. The 20% figure is particularly a little bit head scratching because these chips also have 20% more cores than their predecessor. So sure, you throw more cores at something, it's going to have better performance. We'll have to wait and see how the benchmarks actually bear out whether or not this really is just like faster cores overall or just more cores. But those are the big things that are in here. Other than that, they're going to look pretty similar to the previous generations of these laptops. There's a lot in here that is, focused on really the high end of Apple's market for doing creative work. So in particular, I think the big improvements are the graphics GPU aimed stuff. So it's got potentially more cores and a larger cache. All this stuff is there to like help boost the amount of performance you can get for really intensive tasks. These chips also have a higher RAM ceiling than the previous models, which was one criticism of sort of the early Apple Silicon chips. Is the M1 was limited to just 16 gigabytes. These can now get up to 96 gigabytes with the M2 Max chip. So there's a lot more RAM you can throw at it. So if you're somebody doing really large, photo editing or working on really high resolution video workflows, for example, that's someplace where all this performance will really come in very handy for you.
Nice. Now, in terms of the availability of these devices, are we expecting that they're going to be available sooner? Or is this another situation where you're going, okay, we're talking about them now, but it's going to be a while before you can get your hands on them?
Well, they should be available pretty soon. I believe they are available for order now, and I think they ship next week. I haven't checked recently to see what the current state of those are for deliveries, but I haven't heard of any particular delays in shipping. So it sounds like Apple is confident in their ability to deliver these in short order, which is also probably one of the reasons that they waited and to do it now as opposed to last fall.
That makes sense. Well, I think with that, especially the battery life that they are quoting for this thing, it's pretty impressive.
Right.
And
yeah.
It'll be interesting to see after people have had a chance to use these for a while, how that all plays out. Now, the other device that, or I guess, again, devices that Apple announced are the Mac Mini devices. This, of course, got the upgrade to the new M2 and M2 Pro. The M2 Max is likely left for the Studio, as it has been in the past, and then whatever is above that Ultra. For the Studio. But for now, the new Mac Mini is here. And this has brought an end to the Intel Mac Mini, correct?
Indeed. Yeah, there was a bit of head scratching at first when Apple moved the Mac Mini to the M1 processor. It was one of the first Macs to get moved to Apple Silicon along with the MacBook Air back in 2020. But there was a high-end Intel configuration that was still available. And people were wondering what the deal with that was. And the supposition was that they just weren't ready to bring out a product that could sort of hit those higher performance thresholds. This time around, they have dealt with that by releasing basically two configurations. There's a third one, but we'll talk about that in a second. There's basically a base model at $599, which is a $100 price drop. That is just the M2 processor. It's pretty similar, I believe, to the mid-range configuration on the M2 MacBook Air that Apple launched last year. And then there is a new higher M2 Pro configuration, which brings this more powerful chip in there. The Pro sits in between, obviously, the M2 and the Max. It provides some better memory bandwidth, more cores, and is overall just sort of one of those chips you want for a little more performance there. There is, as I mentioned, a mid-range configuration. It's basically the base configuration with a larger hard drive. I don't know why they separated it as a separate configuration, since you can make the exact same thing by taking the base model and bumping up the storage. So it's really the Mac. I think this is like essentially two Mac Minis, really. It's like the base level Mac Mini, which is a great product that uses sort of the base level chip. It's very affordable and it has a lot of performance in it. And then if you need something that sort of sits in between more that base Mac Mini and the M1 iMac, and then at the higher end, the Mac Studio, the M2 Pro Mac Mini kind of fits in that slot right there. It starts at 1300 and it provides a lot more power, more RAM, etc. So it's kind of an interesting structuring of the product line to see how they sort of fill in their gaps with the Mac Mini.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, minus, as you pointed out, that middle option, which is more like, we don't trust that people are going to realize you can do this. So we will just make it its own option here. I've seen a lot of folks, get excited, particularly about the Mac Mini, and they have been great for us as little studio machines for different purposes. I think, a lot of the nerds among us really like the Mac Mini, and so seeing it get this love, as it were, is pretty exciting stuff. Now, that was the first day of announcements. It started there, but then Apple decided to drop some more news the following day, and this time it was about a resurrection. What happened? What did Apple resurrect?
Steve Jobs is back. No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Oh dear.
No. We whoever had the HomePod getting resurrected in their 2023 Apple bingo card, congratulations, you're a winner. Apple brought it back after 5 years, I believe. I believe the original first generation HomePod debuted in 2018, around February. So almost 5 years to the month. Obviously, they discontinued it about a year ago. The HomePod Mini has been sort of the only thing in this smart speaker lineup for Apple at $99, and a lot of people wondering if there was room for a higher end speaker above that. And Apple's saying, yeah, absolutely, we're bringing back the HomePod. It'll retail for $299, which is $50 cheaper than the original model started at, though I believe it later dropped to $299. It's very similar to the first one. There are
it's even called
on the inside.
It's even called the second generation. They didn't, just go, oh no, we never had a HomePod. This is the HomePod now.
No, it's the HomePod. It looks very similar to the original one. It's not like they've really revised it significantly. It's not like it has a screen on it now or anything like that. They've changed some of the speaker configurations in there and the microphone configurations. It's got a new chip inside of it instead of the previous one, which was powered by the A8 processor. This is powered by the S7, which is the same processor that powers the Series 7 Apple Watch. This does potentially, even though that is a watch processor as opposed to a phone processor, which the A8 was, it's so much newer that it does power some new possibilities for capabilities like they talk about sound recognition is one of the big features, where it'll be able to hear a smoke detector or a carbon monoxide alarm going off and notify you. They also claim it's got some other improvements when it comes to intelligence. Some of that's a little harder to gauge because some of it seems to be software related. And they've also built in a couple new hardware features in there. It has a thread radio, which the HomePod Mini already had, which is a way of communicating with smart home tech. And it has both a humidity and temperature sensor in it, which it was then revealed the HomePod Mini also has and will be getting access to in a subsequent software update. So, a weird announcement, kind of came out of nowhere, but I guess Apple is saying that it feels confident the smart speaker market is still something it wants to be involved in.
I got to tell you, it was, I remember iFixit finding that little sensor inside the HomePod Mini and wondering if it was just about, people are going to put these in their bathrooms. So we need to make sure that if we, you got to turn it off so that it doesn't fritz out whenever the humidity is too high, or I guess temperature for the sake of whether the power supply, I don't know. There were all these
people
reasons why they
their
might be in
HomePod
there.
Mini on their barbecue, and it's going to be a mess.
What's fascinating to me that I've seen is folks have pointed out, people who work on HomeKit applications. Right now, you are not able to view HomePods within third-party HomeKit apps. You can see them in your home if you go to the Home app that's made by Apple, but you're not able to view those in third-party apps. And so they're curious if those sensors within the HomePod will be exposed to third-party apps for use as automation. So I'm kind of curious about that going forward to see what's going on there. And then the inclusion of the just like off the jump, because of course iOS, your iPhone can do sound recognition stuff, but you have to specifically turn it on, and it's kind of complicated. But with
it also blocks. My experience with it, trying to use it at one point, you can't use it and the Siri wake word simultaneously, which they must have fixed.
Is that I was not going to say that because I couldn't remember if that was true in my head. But now that you've confirmed it, I remember that too. Yeah, I remember I didn't want to turn on sound recognition because it stopped the other thing. But yeah, I'm curious. I imagine with the HomePod, because it's always plugged in, then you've got a better experience for, it can pay attention to both and not take up a bunch of battery life is my thought on that, why it works that way. So this automatic sound recognition is a great thing, but I am curious about the integrations in terms of third-party HomeKit applications. So we'll have to see after folks kind of get their hands on these and get to play around with them a little bit more. It's my understanding that for folks who have HomePod Mini, they'll be able to add this via a software update at some point. Do you know when?
Yeah, that will be available on software update. The consensus seems to be maybe next week, but certainly in the next couple weeks. The HomePod, the new second generation HomePod, arrives on February 3rd. So certainly by then, one would assume this software update would be out there.
Got it. Anything else that stuck out to you from this series of announcements that folks should be paying attention to?
Well, I mean, it's always interesting whenever Apple wants to announce some products, and obviously it doesn't go to trade shows like CES because it feels like you can get that announcement attention anyways. This seems to me to feel a little bit like some deck clearing for Apple. I think there's stuff coming down the pike for Apple this year that's going to be more significant. These updates are fairly small, as we said, like both the Max and the HomePod are minor revisions to more or less existing products as opposed to breaking entirely new ground. So I think this is Apple's way of saying, like, we're kind of getting our ducks in a row before we kind of pull the curtain back on maybe some bigger product announcements later in the year.
Yeah. Well, I guess we will be keeping our eyes out for what's next from Apple. But thank you, Dan, for stopping by to talk about this or these new products. If folks want to follow you online and check out all of the work that you're doing, where do they go to do that?
You can check me out at sixcolors.com is where I do all my Apple-based writing. My personal website is over at dmoren.com, which has information on not only my tech work, but also my science fiction novels, which you can check out there. And I'm mostly on Mastodon these days. You can find me at dmoren at mastodon.social, where I do still some posting, not so much on Twitter anymore.
Yeah, same. Thank you, Dan. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Mikah. Always a pleasure.
All righty, folks. Up next, I've got a story of the week for you. Before we get there, though, I do want to tell you about Drata, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. Question for you. Is your organization finding it difficult to achieve continuous compliance as it's growing and scaling? Manual evidence collection might be slowing your team down. Well, as a leader in cloud compliance software by G2, Drata streamlines that SOC 2, ISO 27001, PCI DSS, GDPR, HIPAA, and other compliance frameworks, providing 24-hour continuous control monitoring so you focus on scaling securely. With a suite of more than 75 integrations, Drata easily integrates with your tech stack through applications like AWS, Azure, GitHub, Okta, and Cloudflare. Countless security professionals from companies including Lemonade, Notion, and Bamboo HR have shared how crucial it's been to have Drata as a trusted partner in the compliance process. Drata is personally backed by SVCI, a syndicate of CISO angel investors from some of the world's most influential companies. Drata allows companies to see all of their controls and easily map them to compliance frameworks to gain immediate insight into overlap. Companies can start building a solid security posture, achieve and maintain compliance, and expand their security assurance efforts. Drata's automated dynamic policy templates support companies new to compliance and help alleviate hours of manual labor. Their integrated security awareness training program and automated reminders ensure smooth employee onboarding, and they are the only player in the industry to build on a private database architecture, meaning your data can never be accessed by anyone outside of your organization. All customers receive a team of compliance experts, including a designated customer success manager. I think that's so important. In addition, they have a team of former auditors who have actually conducted more than 500 audits and are available for support and counsel. With a consistent meeting cadence, they keep you on track to ensure that there are no surprises or barriers. Plus, Drata's pre-audit calls prepare you for when your audits begin. So you can call, get that all set up. It's like carbo loading before the big game. Drata's there to make sure you're ready to go for whenever that audit happens. With Drata's risk management solution, you can manage end-to-end risk assessment and treatment workflows. You can flag risks, score them, and then decide whether to accept, to mitigate, to transfer, or avoid them. Drata maps appropriate controls to risks, simplifying risk management and automating the process. Drata's Trust Center provides real-time transparency into security and compliance posture, which improves sales, security reviews, and better relationships with customers and partners. Say goodbye to manual evidence collection and hello to automated compliance by visiting drata.com/twit. That's DRATA.com/twit, bringing automation to compliance at Drata speed. Thank you, Drata, for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, story of the week for you here. And this one I think is, I know I was a little blown away by it when I first came across it. So Time, which of course makes Time magazine, has published a piece. It was by Billy Perigo. And I was going to have Billy on the show. Unfortunately, I was not able to get in touch with Billy. But I thought that this piece was too important to not talk about. And it is about OpenAI and ChatGPT. So OpenAI, of course, is the company that makes various AI software and APIs and basically AI technology. And in fact, is kind of at the forefront of AI technology in terms of generative technology. So that's the DALL-E 2 image generation platform, the text generation platform called ChatGPT, and all of these tools that folks have kind of been playing around with and using. Those all are part of OpenAI. And I think what I have failed to do, and I think, perhaps others are not aware of this either, the thing that I failed to do is to be mindful of how much of what we get from AI is actually AI and how much of it is the work of humans. And it turns out that, according to Time, OpenAI wanted to create the ChatGPT online chatbot application, which you'll remember I interviewed, so to speak, on this show before. But in order to launch that program, they wanted to make sure that it wasn't loaded down with lots of horrible text. Because if you use the internet as your platform, as your, not even platform, but as your database of human language, then that is going to include all sorts of things, both good and bad. And when we say bad, it can be very, 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 very bad. There, of course, it is a reflection of what humans are thinking and doing, and we know that on occasion that does involve violent, awful, racist, sexist. I mean, all of the ists. There's text on the internet for all of that kind of stuff, and so GPT-3, which is at the heart of ChatGPT, it is the kind of the system behind ChatGPT. It is full of that stuff, and what OpenAI wanted to do was make it so that people could use this without seeing a bunch of that horrible stuff. And if you have a small data set or a smaller data set, then you have people go through and basically get rid of the bad stuff so that it's not part of the training data. But if you have a huge data set, like the, vast collection of text from the internet, then you actually need to have AI involved in making the AI that you are wanting to respond better. So the process that's involved in doing this is essentially you have people find the text that's there and then label that text and say, hey, this is bad. This is the reason why. We label this text as being sexist. We label this text as being racist. We label this text as being violent sexual imagery. We label this text as being this, that, and the other. So human beings with the ability to look at something and tell what it is, have to label this, and then it gets fed into the artificial intelligence that then helps to filter out that content for ChatGPT, which of course is kind of the wrapper around GPT-3, right? So the way that this is working, and I should note that it's not just OpenAI. There are many companies, Google, Meta, Microsoft, who work with these companies. They hire out a company. In this case, the one that the Time was talking about is Sama, S-A-M-A. Sama works with, it hires employees, or it has employees in Kenya and Uganda and in India. And then those employees are responsible for labeling this text based on what it is. So as an example, I have, my data set, and I want the data set labeled. So I give Sama a packet of data, the text or what have you, and then Sama has its workers look through that and say, this is this is that, this is this is that. And then Sama gives it back to me, I feed it into the system, and it goes from there. These workers, specifically the ones in Kenya is what the story covers, were paid between $1.32 and $2 per hour. Of note, the timepiece says there's no universal minimum wage in Kenya, but at the time these workers were employed, but at the time these workers were employed at Sama, a receptionist in Nairobi was earning $1.52 per hour. So $1.52 was the minimum wage for a receptionist. These workers are being paid between $1.32 and $2. And what they did was read and label, according to employees that Time interviewed, they read and labeled between 150 and 250 passages of text in a 9-hour shift. So they would sit down, they would label this, and then they would pass that along, and it would kind of go up through the ranks because there were quality engineers, et cetera, that kind of worked their way up before it ever got back to OpenAI for inclusion into the engine to try and improve upon it. But this resulted in people, again, human beings who have to look through kind of the darkest parts of the internet and label this stuff as what it was. And, I can't even really describe some of what you should read the timepiece. It's very good and very, I think, important. Some of the things that they dealt with, bestiality, and of course, sexual abuse, hate speech, violence, all this kind of stuff. They would label it so that it could be excluded from ChatGPT in the end. And this, upon reading this, I kind of had a moment of like, wow, this is really awful, obviously. But then I also had to stop and have the realization that at some point, humans do need to be involved in the process. And I think that what's important here is just the knowledge of how it was being done, how it's being done. Because I can also think about the fact that this device that I have in my hand was made or was assembled in factories that also don't have the best working conditions. This sweater that I'm wearing for this episode was probably made in a factory without the best working conditions. And so it is a very common thing. And I think Time's coverage of this is more about being aware of the fact that although we see this kind of fun toy that we play with, human beings have to be involved in the process, and the human beings that OpenAI is using are, in some cases, depending on your impression of this and your take on this, are being taken advantage of. There was also the one of the things that Sama talks about is that all employees are entitled to attend sessions with wellness counselors. So if they're struggling with what they're seeing or reading, they're supposed to be able to see wellness counselors. But according to the employees, there was high demand, and so many of them were not able to see these counselors. And I think the most telling aspect of this is that Sama also started working with OpenAI, not just on text for ChatGPT, but also imagery. And it's unclear what product that was being, they were working on to help out from OpenAI. That is not in the information that Time saw, but that meant seeing some really horrific imagery. And it ended up with Sama closing its contract with OpenAI 8 months earlier than it had planned to. So it resulted also in, because of those contracts being canceled, employees then talked about the fact that this was because of the nature of the content, because they were seeing this level of disturbing content, they were actually getting paid a bonus for doing the labeling of this stuff. So they lost their bonus. Some of them lost their jobs. And Sama has said that they're no longer working in this field. In fact, let me see. And I want to quote from Sama. After numerous discussions with our global team, Sama made the strategic decision to exit all natural language processing and content moderation work to focus on computer vision data annotation solutions. We have spent the past year working with clients to transition those engagements, and the exit will be complete as of March 2023. That is because before OpenAI, Facebook was reported to be using Sama employees to do content moderation on their platform. And on February 14th, Time actually published a story about this very thing where these folks are being used to moderate content on Facebook. So you've got two instances here of a company. I mean, this was, at least up to this point, the sole purpose of the company was to label content and help to improve upon an AI system. And I guess this is just one of those situations where knowing how the sausage gets made is important in informing how we use the technology, how we appreciate the technology or don't appreciate the technology, and the necessary context surrounding how it works. Because, and this is something that the piece talks about is like a lot of people think it's all just magic and computery nonsense that makes these machines work how they do. But the reason that, I remember there was a post where someone had figured out how to get ChatGPT to be blatantly racist, and they had to kind of go around the protections by throwing off the machine to get it to express the racism that's in its makeup. And the fact that they had to go around the rules and the guardrails that are in place does show the work that these folks did to make it so that it is harder for that stuff to pop up. And it does make me think about then what ChatGPT would look like if OpenAI hadn't hired this team, Sama, or this company, and other companies as well, who all played a role in making it so that you do need to kind of work around to make it do these things. Because it's just using the stuff that we human beings have put on the internet. So yeah, go read that Time piece. It's an exclusive piece over on Time by, again, Billy Perigo. And it is well worth kind of reading through the nuances of it as well, because it's got a lot of information, including stuff about the contracts that Time saw and how much people were making or not making, the overall kind of care that was given or not given to the employees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is something I had not considered. I kind of thought that it was something that the internal developers at OpenAI and then us as we use it and report issues were making the changes to this. And I had not thought about a team of people who just have to look through hour after hour after hour, this horrible content and say, yeah, they don't want this on the platform for sure. All right, let's take a quick break, and then we will come back with a little grab bag of news that I wanted to discuss. But I want to tell you about Thinkst Canary, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. Most companies, and this is frightening, most companies discover they've been breached way too late. Yeah, after it's happened. And so sometimes, days after it's happened, months after it's happened. You don't want that. Thinkst Canary fixes this in just 3 minutes of setup with no ongoing overhead and nearly zero false positives. You can detect attackers long before they dig in. It's no wonder why Thinkst Canary hardware, VM, and cloud-based canaries are deployed and loved on all 7 continents. I got to tell you, I want to visit the one in Antarctica. Prowling attackers look for juicy content in their targeted network. They browse Active Directory for file servers and explore file shares looking for documents. They try default passwords against network devices and web services. They scan for open services across the network. I mean, attackers know what they're doing, obviously. When they encounter a Thinkst Canary, the services on offer are designed to solicit further investigation, at which point they've betrayed themselves and your canary notifies you of the incident. So if I had a Thinkst Canary on the network, it would look like, a network attached storage device that says like company backups. And in that company backups network attached storage device are some PDFs that include, a password vault, or a bunch of plain text files that are supposed to be employee data points or what have you. And the attackers go, ooh, that is juicy. I need that. They go there, and then they've betrayed themselves. And Canary says, hey, look, they clicked on that thing they thought was what they wanted, but really the whole time it was us keeping an eye on things. You can order, configure, and deploy your canaries throughout your network. These can be hardware, they can be virtual, they can be cloud-based birds. Make one a Windows file server, another a router. Throw in a few Linux web servers while you're at it. Each one hosts realistic services and looks and acts like its namesake. Then you wait. Your Thinkst Canaries run silently in the background, waiting for intruders, constantly reporting in and providing an up-to-the-minute report on their status. Even customers with hundreds of canaries receive just a handful of events per year. When an incident occurs, Thinkst Canary will alert you via email, text message, Slack notification, webhook, or old-fashioned syslog. It said webhook. That means that you could set up a punching bag on a robotic arm. So if the Thinkst Canary detects somebody in your network, that robotic arm, boom, can punch you in the face and say, "You've been hacked." And then you hop on and make sure everything's okay. You don't have to do that. It's just a suggestion. A principal security engineer of an F-50 company says, "Canary has helped us detect and mitigate several incidents that could have turned into catastrophes. An alert fired by their cloned site token allowed us to identify and force a takedown of several doppelganger domains that were purchased by bad actors for the purpose of launching phishing attacks against our employees and customers. I can't recommend this product enough. You don't know what you don't know, but Canary helps you know what you need to know when it matters." By the way, for English speakers, that's doppelganger, but the original pronunciation, doppelganger. You may have heard about the Circle CI compromise recently. Most users found out about the incident directly from their Thinkst Canary. Canaries work, and they continue to prove themselves. So visit canary.tools/twit, and for just $7,500 per year, you'll get 5 Canaries, your own hosted console, upgrades, support, and maintenance. And if you use the code TWIT in the How Did You Hear About Us box, that will get you 10% off the price. For life. We know you'll love your Thinkst Canary, but if you're not happy, you can always return your canaries with their 2-month money-back guarantee for a full refund. Listen to this. We have offered a money-back refund guarantee, and in all of the years, it's been claimed zero times, because canaries add incomparable value. That's canary.tools/twit, and enter the code TWIT in the How Did You Hear About Us box. Thank you, Thinkst Canary, for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, back from the break, and I've got another one of those situations where I reached out this morning, and unfortunately the person was out of town, so I wasn't able to have them on, but I wanted to talk about this great re-review on The Verge from Sean Hollister about the Steam Deck. So if you are unaware or unfamiliar, the Steam Deck is a mobile or portable gaming device made by Steam, and it is a kind of Linux-based machine that is, I like how, I didn't realize this about it, but as Sean puts it, it is roughly the power of a PlayStation 4 within this portable console device. It's got your standard controls as well as touch-sensitive trackpads, a touch screen, and I mean, this thing is kind of ridiculous in terms of what it is able to do. But when Steam first announced it, they were kind of doing it as one of these pre-order situations where you could get it on day one when it ships, but it's going to be a little bit beta. It's going to have some rough patches, and some of us did get it despite that and struggled through, and Sean Hollister was one of the people who did. But what he points out in this kind of re-review of the piece is, despite the fact that it started as this beta device and was really rough, Steam has committed to continuing to improve upon the technology and the hardware and the firmware to make something that's worth carrying around. And I thought this was wild. How many hours? Hollister spent 435 hours playing Steam games across 3 different decks, averaging well over an hour per day since it launched. 435 hours since it launched of playtime. And what has been kind of magical for Sean Hollister is that along with playing it kind of in a standard way, the way that you would expect, he's also done some of the other fun stuff like using emulators, streaming games from the PS5 to it, and then even kind of doing some upgrades, which is one of the things that I did with mine. The fan that first came with it was whiny and poorly made. And so there was a new and updated fan that you could install that came from iFixit. So I do want to mention, I'm going to go through some of the complaints that Sean Hollister still has about the Steam Deck. But what's wild is how much this has shrunk from its original set of complaints. So some of these include battery life can be short and it takes a long time to charge. 100% still a problem. You can play without having it plugged in, but if you're playing games that are high graphics, you might as well just keep the thing plugged in. So that doesn't make it as portable as one would expect. You still can't download games without leaving the screen on, which feels like, I don't know, that's just so old school. That's like, oh, if the screen turns off, then of course the connection turns off too. So then you're not able to continue to download. And then Bluetooth audio lag is really bad at times. You can use Bluetooth headphones with the device, but that lag can be so different from what's going on the screen. And that obviously makes for a poor experience. I mean, here is what I said whenever I reviewed it originally. It honestly did not impress me because I felt like you either have a device that is portable and you make sacrifices to have a portable device, or you have a device that is stationary and you make other sacrifices to have a device that is stationary. So if it's stationary, obviously you can't take it with you. But in return, you get a very powerful machine like a gaming PC and a huge display, and you get to play in the comfort of your fancy chair. All of that is what makes kind of the stationary machines worth what they're worth. Then on the other hand, if you're getting a device that's supposed to be portable, you do give up performance, but you get longer battery life. You get comfort in the hand. You get a sort of a focus on not lower quality games, but lower graphics games, that kind of thing. This was trying to find some sort of middle ground, but in doing so, it came short on all of the things that it was supposed to be promising. So yes, it was mobile, but it was mobile for maybe 2 hours at most before the battery life just gave out on it. Yes, it was more powerful than your mobile device, but it was not playing some games without lagging that I had expected it would be able to play without lagging. So falling short on all accounts instead of finding this sweet middle ground Goldilocks spot really, I think, drove it home as something that just was not ready for prime time, or may never be ready for prime time because it may have just been you shoot the ball and you miss. But Sean Hollister says they did in the beginning shoot the ball and miss, but now it is a console that makes sense. And it is something that in the middle ground actually is worth playing. And I agree. I think that many of the concerns that I had at the beginning have been solved by different software changes or firmware changes that the company has made, including dropping 60 frames per second playback to 40 frames per second playback. There's a complaint, obviously, that 30 frames per second is just too slow if you're playing games, and it doesn't look as good, it doesn't feel as good. But 60 frames per second, you start to get some lag on different games. Turns out, and this is, I learned this from this piece as well, 40 frames per second is actually about halfway between 30 frames and 60 frames when it comes to all of the weird math that's happening. So it feels faster than 30 frames, but it doesn't lag like 60 frames. And so you do feel like you're playing a game and that it all just kind of works together. Many of the games that didn't originally work with the Steam Deck are now far more compatible with the Steam Deck. And that, I think, is a big thing. Now, if you go into the library, you can see lots of games that were made to be played on it. And there is incentive for third parties like Microsoft and Sony to provide compatibility for games on its platforms that work on the Steam Deck as well. So yeah, I was really happy to see this re-review of the Steam Deck and see that it has earned more of its middle ground title than it originally did. And that as, I think Steam continues to work on this and see where this can go, it'll be fascinating to see what happens. So that is the first grab bag piece. The second grab bag piece is a quick little story that kind of shocked me. Yesterday at just after 5 p.m., which if you've been in journalism or have heard journalists talk about this, the best time of day to release something that you don't want a lot of people to talk about is after 5 p.m. And then if you can, make it 5 p.m. on a Friday, or excuse me, after 5 p.m. on a Friday. Amazon didn't wait until after 5 p.m. on a Friday. They just went halfway through. And I think that's because it was already enough of like I know what you really mean when you say this situation, that we all kind of went, okay, so you did it after 5 p.m., but at least it wasn't a Friday. Amazon announced that it is closing down its Amazon Smile service. If you've never heard of Amazon Smile, Amazon Smile is this feature, I guess is the best way to put it, that lets you donate to your favorite charities just by shopping on Amazon. And so in effect, whenever you make a purchase, some small percentage of what you buy goes to the charity of your choice. I remember years ago setting mine up for the ASPCA, and ever since then, every time I've made a purchase on Amazon, some small amount goes to the ASPCA. And then once, I think it's every quarter or every half of a year, I get a notification that says, hey, this is how much money you all have donated to this corporation or to this organization. And I remember the last one was like $750,000 or something like that total. Not just from me, to be clear. And I liked it. You know, for me, it was nice to know that that donation was being made, but also whenever I was feeling guilty about using Amazon as much as I did, then I also had that little bit of a relief, like, hey, at least I'm helping out with the ASPCA. Unfortunately, Amazon is now shuttering or sunsetting this feature. And what was frustrating to me was how Amazon announced this change. Again, not only that it was after 5 p.m., but the way that they put it, which was like, hey, we're just not happy with how little of an impact this has made. So we think that we just want to close this down. We thought that by now we'd be doing a lot more. We'd be making a lot more of an impact, but not enough of y'all are using the service or what have you. So we're just going to not do this anymore. Oh, and by the way, here are 12 things that Amazon does regularly that makes us a great company who cares about people and the environment and education and all this other stuff. So please don't be mad. Okay, bye. That was essentially what the email was. And I think that just like this piece from Barbara Krasnoff over on The Verge points out, the headline of it is, I wish Amazon had been honest about why it's sunsetting Amazon Smile. I feel the same. Ultimately, it probably costs them money to work out the logistics and set up this infrastructure to make it so that these donations are calculated and that the money gets sent to the right places and da-da-da-da-da. And so you end up getting $750,000 to the ASPCA. But what does that cost Amazon in going all that way and making all that happen? And then you've got all these different organizations that get listed into it, et cetera. And it's like, why don't you just be honest and say, don't try to make it into something that it's not. I understand not wanting to come out and say, we don't want to pay for this anymore, or whatever the reason happens to be. But to say, we just thought we would have made more of an impact by now. Because the fact is, if you're making an impact, you're making an impact. So an impact has happened. And ask any body of water in any part of the world what an impact means at wearing down rock. Eventually, that rock becomes a river or a canyon, or it is, a huge divot in the ground. Like, those small little impacts add up over time. So whether you're making a tiny impact or a huge impact, that doesn't matter. It's the fact that you're making an impact. And that's what was frustrating to me about this. And then to layer it on with like, even though we're giving up, sorry, someone in the chat said, you rock, Mikah Sargent. Get it? You rock. And so even though they're doing all these other things, it doesn't stop the fact that, removing this and trying to couch it in all this special language of why they're closing it down ultimately doesn't add up and doesn't make sense, other than we just really don't want to deal with this anymore. But we can't tell you that because that'll make us look bad. So instead, we're just going to say, we just wish we'd made more of an impact. Well, me too. Alas, Amazon is sunsetting Amazon Smile, I believe in March. But the company is going to, let me try to find the email because there was something kind of interesting about what they said. Here we go. So, no, I'm sorry. It's not even March. February 20th, 2023 is when Amazon Smile will be fully wound down. I want to read this directly. To help charities that have been a part of the Amazon Smile program with this transition, we will be providing them with a one-time donation equivalent to 3 months of what they earned in 2022 through the program. And they will also be able to accrue additional donations until the program officially closes in February. So any money that I'm sending to the ASPCA, for example, between now and February 20th will still go to them. They will also get a donation equivalent to 3 months of what they earned in this past year. So yeah, again, disappointing, but ultimately not surprising. In fact, whenever I saw just the notification for the email headline and it said update on Amazon Smile, I already knew what it was going to say. And I was not surprised. So that is my grab bag of other stories, which brings us to the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. I believe Jason will be back next week, but until then, you just got me. Thank you, of course, for tuning into this episode. We publish this show every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That's where you can go to subscribe to the show in audio and video formats, twit.tv/TNW. Of course, if you want to watch the show live, which we record every Thursday starting at 11 a.m. Pacific, you go to twit.tv/live. Now's the time where I mention the Club TWiT program, which you can join to get ad-free episodes of all the shows on the TWiT network, starting at $7 a month or $84 per year. When you join the club by going to twit.tv/clubtwit, on top of ad-free episodes of every show, you also get access to the TWiT Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else, and access to the very cool Club TWiT Discord. That's a place to go where you can chat with your fellow Club TWiT members all the time and in all sorts of streams and shows and topics and content. There's a lot going on in the Club TWiT Discord, and it is always hopping and popping. Twit.tv/clubtwit, starting at $7 a month, $84 a year. I say starting at because some folks said, hey, I'd actually like to give you more than just $7 a month. Can you do that? And so Patrick Delahanty flipped a switch, and suddenly folks were able to provide or pay more if they wanted to. And I think part of the reason for that is because we continue to make it more and more valuable. There are 3 shows: the Untitled Linux Show, which is a show all about Linux, Paul Thurrott's Hands on Windows program, which is a short format show all about Windows tips and tricks, and my Hands on Mac show, which is a show that is filled with tips and tricks regarding all of Apple's various devices. And I mentioned this before I got the complaint, why don't you just call it Hands on Apple if it's not just about Mac? Well, if you want to talk to Apple's various lawyers and say, hey, this company wants to use your name for their podcast title, and then have them shake their fingers sternly at you, be my guest. But until then, Hands on Mac is going to have to do. So that is the name of the show that you can get there as well. All part of the $7 a month, $84 a year subscription. So thank you to those of you who have done so. Thank you to those of you who are considering it. And thank you to those of you who have told your friends that they too should consider it. If you want to follow me online, I'm at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network. Or you can head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. Check me out on Thursdays for Hands on Mac, which publishes a little later today if you are a Club TWiT member. On Sundays for Ask the Tech Guys, the show I host with Leo Laporte, where we take your tech questions live and answer them. And on Tuesdays for iOS Today, which I co-host with Rosemary Orchard, where we talk all things iOS, tvOS, HomePod OS, iPad OS, all the OSs. Thank you so much to John Ashley, who without him, this show would not be possible. Also Burke, who is back and makes sure that the guests sound and look as good as they can. And I really appreciate that. That is just an absolute necessity. And so I'm thankful to you and anyone else who happens to be in the studio working today for the hard work that you all do. And I and Jason will see you next week on Tech News Weekly. Goodbye.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Ad Magazine, and each week I join with my co-host to bring you This Week in Space, the latest and greatest news from the final frontier. We talk to NASA chiefs, space scientists, engineers, educators, and artists, and sometimes we just shoot the breeze over what's hot and what's not in space, books, and TV. And we do it all for you, our fellow true believers. So whether you're an armchair adventurer or waiting for your turn to grab a slot in Elon's Mars rocket, join us on This Week in Space and be part of the greatest adventure of all time.